Welcome to the Zenergy Podcast. I'm Karan Takar, and today I sit down with Jason Hochman, co-founder and executive director of the Direct Air Capture Coalition. We discuss DACC's origins, its 4 operational pillars, and how policies like the Inflation Reduction Act support the industry. Jason also breaks down key direct air capture projects and their role in climate solutions. I hope you enjoy the conversation. Hello, Jason. It is wonderful to have you on the podcast. Folks, this is Jason Hochman, the co-founder of DACC, the Direct Air Capture Coalition. Today, we're going to be discussing Jason's journey, the genesis story behind DACC, how the industry is shaping up, and just learn all about Jason. We're going to be learning all about Jason. Again, thank you for taking the time. And to kick things off, I thought it would be fun to start with a question regarding if you had never started DACC, what would you be doing right now? Do you think you'd still be tackling climate challenges, or would we find you tackling something totally different? And this is fun to me. This is fun.
Firstly, thank you very much for the kind invitation and for giving me this platform to talk about the Direct Air Capture Coalition and about this very exciting, burgeoning, new climate-critical sector. To answer your question, what would I be doing if I had not founded and run the Direct Air Capture Coalition? It's a great question. I'm not sure. I think I definitely would still be working in the climate space. I firmly believe that climate change is the greatest challenge facing humanity, and it also represents a tremendous opportunity in many ways to build better systems, better technology, a better future for us and people around the world and our children and future generations. The thing that led me to direct air capture into the space of carbon removal was fundamentally I see it as a hopeful story that we have the capacity to create new tools at our disposal that can mitigate some of the damage that we've done to the climate and create a more stable, prosperous, more stable climate, more prosperous, safe future for future generations.
Amazing. And what inspired the idea? Like, how did the genesis of the idea to form the coalition actually come about? Is there a story behind that? And also, would love it if you mentioned that incredible statistic.
Yeah. So the real genesis of the coalition is born out of a lot of work that's been done over time, but I think that there's been a real uptick and explosion of interest in carbon removal and negative emissions technology that grew out of the 2018 UN 1.5 degrees Celsius report, which basically said we're going to need a lot of carbon removal. We're going to need gigatons, that is billions of tons annually, in order to get to net zero, in order to limit warming to 1.5 degrees Celsius or less, or even keep it within 2 degrees Celsius. And the reason for that, or part of why that is the case, is what I had alluded to you before we started recording, which is this absolutely mind-blowing, hard to fathom statistic that if you were to aggregate the total mass of carbon dioxide that humanity has put into our air and into our oceans since 1900, the total volume, the total mass of that would be greater than the total mass of every single living thing on this planet, plus every single thing that humans have built. So every elephant, every blue whale, every building in New York City, and everything else, that is about equal to or less than the mass of carbon dioxide that we put into the atmosphere, and that is causing all of these the climate challenge that we're seeing, and the impacts that people are facing on a daily basis and on a more frequent basis. Severe weather events that all is coming from the greenhouse gases that we've been emitting over centuries, and that we need to firstly stop emitting, but then also start to clean up the mess that we've made.
I'm still just mind blown by that statistic.
Yeah.
I would think if you added up all the elephants, just elephants alone, that the carbon weight would not be equal to that just subset. And you add in the buildings, the cars, as you said,
I mean,
the whales, the people,
every living
literally
thing,
every living thing and every piece of
built thing.
infrastructure.
Yeah.
That is crazy. And interesting regarding how the UN report and the findings there ultimately inspired or like made you realize that there is an opportunity and a need to start a coalition as you had. So
To kind of dive in a little bit deeper on the backstory there, I think that 1.5 degrees Celsius report got a lot of people thinking, okay, we need to really start moving the ball forward on this front. And there were a handful of early innovators in this space, companies that were working on this technology. And my co-founder, Nicholas Eisenberger, he put together this kind of virtual summit in 2020, that one of the recommendations about how you actually can mobilize the scaling of direct air capture, one piece of it would be to form this type of nonprofit multi-stakeholder coalition organization to advance and accelerate the development and deployment. And I, around the same time, started learning more about, becoming really interested in, passionate about this nascent space of carbon dioxide removal, started having conversations, getting connected with folks, and I got linked up with Nick and a couple other folks who were working to get this thing off the ground. I eagerly put up my hand to be a part of the group working on that. Did that on the side for about 6 months, and then took a real leap in September 2021 and left my full-time job to focus 100% on co-founding and establishing the Direct Air Capture Coalition. 8 months later, in May of 2022, we launched publicly, at the time, with 22 direct air capture technology companies and then 10 stakeholder partner organizations. So civil society groups, nonprofit, other NGOs, along with a few research and academic institutions. Since that time, we've now grown to have over 110 different member companies and partner organizations, including over 50 direct air capture technology companies. Mm-hmm. And I think that is a testament to the need and the need for collaboration.
It's only really been like
space.
2 years now.
Yeah, it's been about a little less than 2.5, and we need to find ways to break down silos, to build out and serve as the connective tissue that any sector needs in order to thrive, particularly one with so many inherent challenges and opportunities within it. So I think the companies and the many ecosystem actors that are part of this understand that there's a lot more to be gained by collaboration and working together to solve common problems than kind of operating in fragmented silos.
And as we were talking a little bit before kicking off this conversation, the timing of the launch of the coalition was pretty ideal because it came after the infrastructure bill was passed, and then somewhat before, but like also as the IRA was being developed and Pass, which, as you were walking me through, both had like pretty substantial incentives and programs to help direct air capture um, grow, which we will definitely dive into. But before getting to that, so you mentioned you were working with a few others for a period of 6 months and then went full time for a period of 8 months before officially publicly launching. Would love to dive into how, like, what the work looked like, what the value proposition was for those first, you said 22 stakeholders or so. Like, what were you pitching to them? What did the process of outreach look like? Like, how did you go about the targeting? It's like the more detail, the better here, because I love, as the listeners will probably have heard me say many times, learning about the early days of getting something off the ground, because I think it's such a tough, uncertain period, but by sticking through it, really cool things can come out, as we're seeing here.
Yeah. So that was definitely an exciting and challenging time. And basically, to walk you through it, we were doing a lot of outreach to our known universe of direct air capture technology companies and reaching out to them, saying, we think this is a necessity for scaling the space, having an entity that can be both a voice of this community and also help be a force multiplier for everyone's work and address common challenges together. And so we had material and set up calls with a lot of these companies, and almost universally, I mean, the ones that we spoke to were on board. They understood that there needs to be this type of non-commercial entity focused 100% on addressing the challenges and capturing the opportunities of scaling this sector. A lot of these, there are so many cross-cutting challenges in this space that no one company will be able to address them all. Most people don't even know what DACC is. There's a ton of education and awareness raising work that needs to be done.
Mm-hmm.
There is a lot of community engagement work that needs to be done. There's a lot of hard technical scientific work that needs to be done. There's a lot of market shaping and market building and policy development that needs to happen. And there needs to be conduits and channels for information flow and real-time insights that early stage startups, that they cannot do it all. I mean, the entrepreneurs, the innovators, the people who are working to develop and deploy this technology have picked one of the hardest things imaginable. And what we want to do is be a resource for them and want to see everyone who is working so hard at playing a role in addressing humanity's greatest challenge. We want to see them succeed, and we want to do what we can to help enable that.
Mm-hmm. Is there a commitment level that you asked the stakeholders that you initially engaged to, commit to participating in the coalition? Like, what does that look like? And you mentioned 22 stakeholders. Could you just walk us through some of the subsets? Because I think that would provide clarity to the audience on how the ecosystem is kind of structured.
Yeah. So at the outset, when we launched initially, we had 22 direct air capture technology companies that were founding members from around the world. I think at the time it was from around 10 countries or so, and including Climeworks, which is the largest, most well-known direct air capture company. Heirloom, which is based in California, they also are doing tremendous work, and I'd say are at a bit of a more mature stage than some of the earlier stage companies. And so there were 22 of these technology developer companies. Then there were 10 stakeholder partner organizations, so entities like Clean Air Task Force, World Resources Institute, and academic and research and academic institutions, the University of Michigan's Global CO2 Initiative, and a Georgia Tech, University of Georgia Tech's Direct Air Capture Center, Klaus Lackner's Center for Negative Carbon Emissions at Arizona State University. So then over time, now we're at 110, which includes over 50 direct air capture technology companies. And so those are for-profit companies. Then we also have another 30 for-profit companies that are in the broader DACC value chain or market ecosystem. So storage or sequestration or utilization partners, energy providers, marketplaces, supply chain partners, and then another 30 of our stakeholder partners, which are other nonprofits and other research and academic institutions, and located around the world on 5 continents, over 20 countries. Everyone has their niche or their role to play in the system, but there are common challenges. And I think that there's a lot of value in being this connective tissue and helping build out the connective tissue and creating opportunities for cross-pollination and enabling partnerships, facilitating collaboration opportunities. And I think that without our providing that function, things would just be moving a lot slower or not moving at all. We also so kind of taking a step up and looking at a high level, I think of our programming, our activities. What we do is really orienting around 4 strategic pillars. The first is informing. So that is raising awareness, educating key actors across society, be they corporations, policymakers, environmental advocates, media, investors, general public, as to what direct air capture is, why it's important, what role it has to play in the broader portfolio of climate solutions, and how you, your organization, your entity can or should be involved or thinking about the engaging in this sector. So that is one, that's informing. Then 2 is connecting. So that is what I alluded to about helping build out, serve as the connective tissue for this space. We organized in partnership with Rocky Mountain Institute and Breakthrough Energy, the Global Direct Air Capture Conference, which was held last October 2023 at Columbia University, a 2-day conference with a really tremendous list of leading innovators and thinkers across this market ecosystem. We amazingly were able to have video remarks from Secretary John Kerry, who was serving as the Special Presidential Envoy for Climate, and Senator Bill Cassidy of Louisiana. We had really, really great representation from around the world at this event. And I think, enabling these important discussions and also the networking opportunities there. We'll be doing that again in New York City, this time at NYU on March 17th and 18th.
Amazing.
So, keep an eye out, sign up for our, go to DACCcoalition.org, sign up for our newsletter so you can be the first to know as we formally send out a save the date and get the website up and running.
There's one thing I learned about attending events climate-related events in New York City is you want to register early.
Yeah.
Those things sell out quickly.
Yeah. And hopefully it brings a great group together to
I mean, it
to talk
sounds
through
like the
these
first year
challenges.
had a really great group, and congratulations. I've organized conferences, and I know
It
it
is,
takes a lot.
yes.
It's like a
I mean,
full-time effort.
it went as well as I could have possibly hoped. The only person who was happier that it was over when it, when it all wrapped up, the only person who was happier than I was my wife. Because, she had to deal with me while I was, running around with my hair on fire trying to make sure this thing happened.
Conferences in general, I feel like, are just a
They are a
process.
lot of work, and being an attendee is one thing, and you do not see, even a fraction of what is going on behind the scenes, or what all the work that needs to happen to put those things on. But I do think that they serve an important function, particularly in a emerging sector. So that is, the connecting, this enabling opportunities for cross-pollination. That's the second pillar. The third is facilitating. So that is trying to provide broad general access to opportunities as they come. So folks who want to engage with or work with direct air capture technology companies will often come to us and say, we have got this RFP. Can you disseminate it, or can we present to your membership? And so we'll happily provide that service, that function, because it it's necessary, and it then enables these partnerships to hopefully form. We have a jobs board on our website that compiles all of the openings at member companies and partner organizations. Recently relaunched with cdrjobs.earth. So we want our website to really be a one-stop shop for anyone and everyone who is interested in learning more about, investing in, working in the DACC space. And in that regard, we want to help build and support the capacity of our members. We also are a nominator for the Earthshot Prize, Prince William's big initiative to support climate innovation. And so we make the opportunity to be nominated available to our members and partner organizations. In fact, just yesterday, the Earthshot Prize held the Earthshot Innovation Summit in Midtown Manhattan at the Plaza Hotel in partnership with Bloomberg Philanthropies. That was fortunate to be able to attend, and they announced the finalists for this year's set of Earthshot Prize winners. And we're always trying to think of ways like, how can we be a force multiplier? How can we be a catalyst for this field and for our members and partners? So that's the third, is the facilitate. Then the fourth is advocate. So that is help shape and influence policy that can help address challenges that are facing the field and unlock the potential for scaling. There are a lot of barriers, there are a lot of opportunities, and helping be a conduit of information flows to and from the frontline innovators working to get this technology researched, developed, deployed, and scaled with policymakers is an integral and essential function. So just to recap that, it is inform, connect, facilitate, and advocate are really the pillars that we try to how we're adding value and how we're operating.
Thanks so much for providing that detailed breakdown. Really helped provide clarity on all the different work streams of the coalition. And on that last point, as I alluded to a little bit earlier, both the Inflation Reduction Act and the infrastructure bill provided incentives to direct air capture, like the hub program. Could you talk a little bit about how those major legislative pieces have helped build up the direct air capture industry, why they were important, what you saw happen in the space after those were passed?
Yeah, great question. And I'll start by just saying that the infrastructure bill and the Inflation Reduction Act have really put the United States forward as a clear leader on policy to support the development of this entirely, new nascent critical sector of direct air capture and carbon removal more broadly. To get into the details of those policy provisions, the bipartisan infrastructure law established a $3.5 billion program to set up four regional direct air capture hubs. The first tranche of that funding, $1.2 billion, was made available in a funding opportunity announcement in late 2022, and the first two DACC hubs were awarded in Louisiana in a partnership with Heirloom and Climeworks, and South Texas 1.5, which is a subsidiary of Occidental, and in partnership with Carbon Engineering, a DACC company that they had acquired. So there's this $3.5 billion, that 1.2 had gone out, and then actually just last week, the Department of Energy put out an NOI, a notice of intent, to make available an additional $1.8 billion in funding as part of the DACC Hubs program. And there will be a NOFO, a notice of funding opportunity, coming in the winter that DACC companies, developers, and others will be able to apply for. So you've got the $3.5 billion DACC Hubs program that was from the bipartisan infrastructure law. And then critically, the Inflation Reduction Act significantly enhanced an existing tax credit, 45Q, such that direct air capture projects that sequester CO2 geologically are eligible to $180 a ton tax credit as part of this. And there's a slightly lower dollar amount for DACC utilization. That's $135 or $130, excuse me. Those numbers, the 130 and the 180, were up from $35 and $50 respectively as a result of the Inflation Reduction Act. And just as critically, and perhaps even more critically in real world terms, the Inflation Reduction Act significantly enhanced that tax credit in a couple other ways. One is it lowered the size threshold to be able to claim this credit from 100,000 ton capacity, 100,000 ton capture and removal capacity, to 1,000 tons. And it also increased or pushed back the timeline that you would need to break ground on this facility to be able to claim this tax credit from 2025 to, I believe, 2033 or 2032 or 2033.
What do you mean by that?
So what I mean by that is that in order to claim the tax credit prior to the Inflation Reduction Act, you would have needed to broken ground, begin constructing a 100,000 ton facility for you to be able to claim that $50 credit. That is just not where this space is. It really would just be kind of a credit on paper, because maybe there's probably one company that could feasibly break ground, or that has broken ground on a plant that size. The vast majority of of the sector are at an earlier stage and are not going to be able to break ground in the near future on a 100,000
So it's
ton
giving more
facility.
time.
It gives more time and it lowers the size threshold. So 1,000-ton plant is a lot more realistic for a lot of the next generation DACC companies than 100,000-ton as an early stage.
I think actually
plant.
it'd be really helpful to dive into those size thresholds slightly to like get a sense of like how exactly these projects ultimately manifest. So like I think people have a sense just because the word is like very tangible, direct air capture of what it is. You're capturing carbon from the air. But in terms of like how that actually happens in practice, could you just walk us through like a few different types of projects briefly, and like generally how that size parameter fits into those various projects?
Yeah, so basically right now, the total amount of CO2 being captured from direct air capture facilities operating today is something like 50,000 tons a year. And that be assuming that these plants are operating at full capacity year round. There is the largest plant in the world is in Iceland. It's Climeworks Mammoth facility. Mammoth was opened in May of this year. I had the good fortune of being able to visit and be there for the opening. That plant has a capacity of 36,000 tons per year. Right next to it is the Orca facility, which launched in September of 2021. That has capacity to do 4,000 tons of removal a year. So combined, that's 40,000.
40 out of the 50.
Yeah. Then there's an heirloom plant in Tracy, California, that does 1,000 tons. Just this August, Heimdall opened a facility in Oklahoma that is the largest operating facility in the United States that does 5,000 as a 5,000 ton capacity, and there are a handful of other kind of smaller demonstrator plants that you get to around 45 to 50,000. There is a plant that will be not sure the exact date that'll be in operation, but the 1.5 Stratos plant has will be significantly larger than that at 500,000 tons, a half a megaton. But the DACC hubs program is linked to establish 4 regional hubs that will have the capacity to do a megaton, 1 million tons. But like, let's take a step back here. I'm talking right now in the tens of thousands to get up to the millions of tons. We're going to need billions of tons of removal every year from DACC as part of a broader portfolio of carbon removal solutions doing gigatons worth of removal by mid-century to be able to meet our international climate targets to get to net zero. And getting from where we are today to the billions of tons is going to be a Herculean effort. And I think it is why it's so important to have these projects in the ground operating now so that we can be learning from them, so that we can have deployment-led innovation. So basically learning by doing, wherein when you actually have the technology operating in the field, things are going to go wrong, or you are going to be able to better adjust and understand where there are opportunities for improving the technology, for improving its performance. And additionally, as you scale up, you also then have opportunities to achieve economies of scale and get costs down. And beyond what you'll learn about the technology itself when you're operating these facilities, you also are building more muscle memory, getting more shots on goal, and helping develop the broader set of soft and hard infrastructure that is necessary for these projects. So understanding what is the permitting and regulatory kind of process for getting these plants built, understanding how to go about community engagement, to work with the people in the communities who are living near these sites and what type of community benefits are important to them, to be able to also help develop a trained, skilled workforce that can build, operate, maintain these facilities, having the financial and market mechanisms, that'll be necessary to sustain and catalyze the growth of this sector. And all of those things require us to be working to get projects developed now for the hard technology and engineering reasons, for these policy, regulatory environment, permitting reasons, for everything that goes into the project development. There are a plethora of areas that we're all kind of solving in real time. And the more that you have the opportunity to kind of build in that structure, it'll be a lot easier to get from $1 million to 2 million to 10 million to 100 billion to $1 billion than perhaps to that first stage of things.
That was an incredible breakdown. Thank you for providing that.
I will interject because I realized I did not touch on the second part of your initial question.
Which actually we'll get to. I just quickly want to ask a follow-up on the economics. You mentioned by getting these projects deployed, it will ultimately have all of these tertiary impacts, like learning, and then also driving down the costs, the financing front, also on the technology side. And then additionally, you mentioned the 2 tax credits that the IRA helped implement. So like on the commercial viability side of things, what is the target that the DACC community has, if there is like a certain threshold that people are aiming for, which once that threshold is superseded, then DACC projects won't necessarily need additional support on the commercial side?
So there are really two answers, or like 2 areas to dive into on that question. On the threshold, I think the number that you hear bandied about, that everyone talks about as their target, is $100 a ton, which is really quite ambitious, and that is grown out of a couple of different factors. One, the Department of Energy, as part of their Earth Shots initiative, set a goal of $100 a ton. When you dig into it, it gets a little bit more complicated. $120, or what does that look like with inflation over time, and is it a realistic target for such a complex technology? If I were to ask you, so different DACC technologies would have different answers to that. The thing that you'll see kind of quoted or cited in a lot of reports would be in like a $600 to $1,000 range. Maybe more than that for some, maybe less for some. I'd recommend going to the DACC Coalition website and checking out our report library, which compiles over 250 third-party deep dive reports into direct air capture. You can filter by subject area, and so if you want to look at kind of cost trajectories and models, we have some of the relevant
you really
material.
Want to geek out,
if you really geek out there. But all that is to say, or kind of going back to the question I was going to pose, is what can you get a ton of, like a literal ton, for $100? Is there, the only things that you can actually buy right now, in physical terms, for a ton of, for $100, like sand or maybe gravel. But when you think about anything, a ton is a lot. And
the way to get that sand is you go to the beach.
Yeah.
Hire a few interns.
Yeah, and that they might want more than $100 to dig up or collect a ton of sand. But what I'll say is that if you do get to $100 a ton or $200 a ton, it does become a lot more economically viable and a lot more appealing as an emissions abatement option, and just inherently a lot more scalable. I'm sorry, what was the second part of the question? I've
Well, I think you actually answered the economic aspect, whether there's a threshold needs to be like once that is superseded, then DAC technologies will ultimately reach that commercial viability standpoint. And then maybe we could circle back, unless if you have more to say on this subject.
There was a piece from Extantia Capital, a Medium post from that they put out in February that I'll recommend that you include a link to, that really did a digestible but deep dive into that $100 a ton target. And it was one of the best pieces of that, gave a history of the direct air capture technology space, a look at what the landscape is currently, and then where they see it going. That I just found to be really digestible but comprehensive and insightful. That I would recommend folks look into, and provide the link for people to click on that and read it through. It's one of the best, just kind of overall overviews of the space and where it stands today and where it might be going.
Awesome. We'll definitely link that.
Yeah.
Please do share.
We'll
really
absolutely
appreciate it.
do.
And now circling back, we only have a few minutes left. So if you could briefly talk about how the community or you personally are looking at DAC in the context of the uncertainty with the election. Do you feel as if DAC will be significantly impacted one way or the other, depending on the election outcome?
Yes. So I think what's particularly notable about direct air capture and carbon removal and carbon management more broadly is that it actually has bipartisan support. I think from kind of the center left to center right, there is an understanding that this is necessary, and this also is a real job creation opportunity. The DAC Hubs program was championed by a bipartisan group of senators and congressional representatives, including Senator Bill Cassidy, Republican of Louisiana, who provided video remarks at our conference. The 45Q tax credit that I mentioned prior, that was, I believe, my history might be off a little bit here, but that was initially created in 2010 for point source carbon capture projects. It was actually amended to include direct air capture under the Trump administration in 2020. So it isn't, I really don't think that the carbon management, carbon removal DAC provisions of the Inflation Reduction Act and the other policy support that's in place, I don't think that'd be at the top of the chopping block, or when if a new government comes in with different ideas on the necessity of climate technology. And I think also when you look at where these projects are likely to be deployed, or where the infrastructure, the expertise, the skill sets, a lot of them are going to be in red states. And they will provide a lot of jobs and a lot of economic value and job creation opportunities that stand to benefit people, representatives and politicians across the aisle.
Just to follow up on that slightly, so there are some in the climate community who aren't super supportive of DAC.
Yep.
For whatever reason they might have. What would you say to that subset of people?
So where they are coming from is they see direct air capture and carbon removal broadly as a moral hazard, as it being a fig leaf for polluters to be able to maintain business as usual. And I think that I understand where they're coming from, and it is a danger that you need to be cognizant of and, have guardrails in place to make sure that that is not how the space is developing. But the matter of fact is the UN IPCC, the leading authority on climate science, the national academies, basically every credible group that has put in the time and research has made clear that large-scale carbon removal is necessary. The words of the 2022 UN IPCC assessment report were that large-scale carbon removal is essential and unavoidable for meeting our international climate goals. We are going to need this. We are going to need this at a very significant scale, and we need to begin today for all those reasons I was talking about before. This isn't a one or the other thing. We need all of these solutions. And to be clear, the vast, 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 vast majority of work will need to be done on decarbonizing the economy, on reducing emissions, on implementing clean energy solutions, on electric vehicles, on energy efficiency, on solar, wind, geothermal, next generation nuclear, all of these things that we all know. But there's still a critical role to be played by direct air capture and carbon removal. There are going to be sectors that are going to be extraordinarily hard to decarbonize, and those are often thought of as like residual emissions. Even if we were to shut down every coal-fired power plant, every natural gas, everything that is part of the energy system that pollutes, and replace it with zero carbon alternatives, what are you going to do about aviation? That is a lot of emissions. What about shipping? What about certain industrial processes that, as a result of the actual process itself, emit CO2? So, steel, cement, iron production. There are going to be these sectors that we don't necessarily have the solutions for right now, or the solutions are a ways away, that we're going to need to clean up those residual emissions to get to net zero. And then the hope is that you can then get to net negative globally with our emissions, to begin to actually draw down all of that carbon dioxide and greenhouse gases that is in the atmosphere causing these challenges. The trillions of tons, that the mass of which we alluded to at the outset, being greater than every living thing and every built thing. There's a big mess to be cleaned up, and pretending that we don't need it or that it is a distraction in one form or another, we can walk and chew gum. Society is there are a lot of people out there, and it is dynamic, and we can do a lot of things at the same time. And I feel there's a certain myopic viewpoint of that. If we need to focus 100% on reducing emissions, then if we need to, we'll clean it up. Like, no, we need to be doing everything everywhere all at once.
you've traveled to all 7 continents, which actually is very cool. You've been to Antarctica?
I have my fortunate enough that my parents both are semi-retired, and they taken a lot of big trips. And one year they said they were going to go to Antarctica, and I was like, I need to join you for that. This is a
Yeah.
once in a lifetime
Literally.
opportunity.
What
And
was it like?
it was otherworldly, as you can imagine. Unlike anywhere else, given that it is populated, unpopulated by unpopulated by people besides a few, scientists and mostly penguins. I actually, I went in the water in Antarctica. Did the penguin plunge?
Wow. The cold plunge on steroids.
Yeah, but all that is, being there also does, you do see the impacts of climate change when saying, oh, this glacier here used to be, or this, this ice shelf used to be this much bigger. And you can there are points where you see it calving, where you see it falling into the ocean. And, we went there in February, which is basically their summer, but it also was like, it was funny, actually. When we were there, it was when the polar vortex was hitting the northeast of the United States in New York, such that Antarctica, when I was there, was warmer than New York, which any number of different climate weather factors that go into that. But yeah, so that was an incredible experience. Being able to visit Antarctica.
So on top of your incredible experience to Antarctica, you've also visited 6 other continents. And is there any particular place, maybe it is Antarctica as well, but that has completely surprised you or had the biggest impact on your perspective about the environment?
So last September, I had the good fortune of being able to attend and actually participate and speak at the Africa Climate Summit in Nairobi, Kenya. And Kenya, in particular, is distinctly well-positioned to be a carbon removal powerhouse. And there are a whole host of reasons for that, largely because they have a wealth of untapped clean energy resources, geothermal, solar, wind. They have the right geology, basaltic formations to mineralize CO2 in. They have a young, growing workforce, talented workforce and a lot of engineering talent. And what makes it particularly compelling having DACC there is, even as they have these clean energy, of all this clean energy potential, a large portion of the Kenyan population does not have access to affordable clean energy. It's a massive problem. And the reason for that, in part, is there isn't any large user. There isn't a steady source of large demand for that energy. There isn't any heavy manufacturing or huge energy consumers. So one of DACC's biggest challenges right now is the energy consumption. But that becomes less of a bug and more of a feature in this context, because if you had DACC facilities, then it actually makes sense to build out this renewable energy, clean energy infrastructure that would then provide more affordable, accessible clean energy to the broader Kenyan population. And there are some incredible people working on this problem there. There is a company, a Kenyan direct air capture company called Octavia Carbon, that worked very closely with. When I was in Kenya, got to tour their facility outside Nairobi. I think they now have expanded the team somewhere like 50 or 60 young, talented Kenyan engineers working to play a role in this grand challenge. And it will take people around the world working hard to solve this problem, to scale these solutions. And we've spoken a lot about, how the United States is really a leader in this front, and that is tremendous, and that needs to be applauded and expanded on and maintained and enhanced. But we're going to need carbon removal and direct air capture around the world to really get to the scale that we need. And seeing the folks working on this in Kenya and working with these people and our members and partners across the world gives me the faith and the optimism that we'll be able to do this, because we all know that we need to do it and that we all are working together to make this happen and create a brighter, safer, more prosperous future and a stable climate for us, for our kids, for our grandkids, and for people around the world.
Thank you so much, Jason, for all of your insights and for sharing your time today. Really appreciated the discussion. I learned so much about direct air capture and your coalition. I'm inspired by what you're up to and really appreciate your time. Thank you.
Thank you very much for the opportunity. I appreciate it, and hope to visit. Hope to join you in Antarctica sometime in the future.
Likewise. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks so much for checking out the Zenergy Podcast. If you enjoyed today's episode, please take a moment to rate and subscribe to the podcast. It would mean so much to me and the rest of the team. We release episodes every Thursday, so stay tuned for all new episodes featuring industry leaders building a cleaner, greener future for us all. See you next time.